Welcome everybody, and we're into the pointy end of this this course. What we're doing today is really focusing in on the sort of just the mechanics of a safe system assessment, really, because the first three modules we did were all focused on ensuring we've got the principles right, we understand, we're on the same page there, we know what goes into the exposure, the likelihood, the severity. And it's been really good to sort of see the assignments that have come in, and people are getting clarity around that, asking questions, reading those fact sheets that we've provided in Schoology to try to really hone consistency. What I'm finding with most people is in this group is a really high level of road safety technical knowledge and really good understanding of what influences crashes and pretty good categorization, but that's the bit that I think needs a little bit more refinement. So keep working on that, keep reading those fact sheets, and keep looking at that Austroads guide, the Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework document, because that's got a bit more clarity in it as well. But what we're going to do today is get you all prepared to do that safe system assessment for the site that Kathy's provided you. Now, Kathy, as I bring my slides up, do you want to make any comments on that?
Your sites are all in Schoology, and thanks to those who got in touch to say you wanted something a bit different. So if you haven't had a look at it yet, do jump in there and have a look at where we've got you going. You can do this as a group activity. So if you'd like to work with others from your local office, you can do it together. We probably ask that no more 4 people maximum per group, you think, Ken?
Well, we want to ensure that everybody in the group is actually actively participating. So yeah, I think 4 would be very much at the top end of that for a training course. But if you're doing an actual safe system assessment, yeah, you can have really as many people as you want in the assessment team, and have a bit of well, we might have some logistical nightmares trying to wrangle 10 people around to do a safe system assessment, but really there would be no limits on that. But yeah, for the purpose of this assignment, no more than
right. And everything for that component is in the Module 5 folder. So if you've been looking perhaps in Module 4, it's all in the Module 5 folder.
Yeah, so you'll be using a template we provide you, and I'm going to take you through that at the end because we're trying to make your life as easy as possible. All we really want is assurance that you understand the process and you're able to do this. We don't want you sort of laboring away on stuff that is not just proving that point to us. So we've given you a template, Word document template, and it's really just about populating that with some key information about your site. Yeah, good. So I think you'll love it. Everybody loves getting out to a site and analysing it in particular. It brings everything home to a real world practical scenario. So let me get into this and prime you up on how to do that. But do keep your questions and comments coming in as you have been doing throughout all the modules. So the things I want to cover and achieve today, really want to look at where you can get this guidance on safe system assessments and point you at some documents, which you might already be aware of, but nonetheless, I'll point those out. How we complete the safe system assessment matrix, and that's the meat of a safe system assessment, and then how we write up the assessment report, and then categorizing any recommendations or treatments we're suggesting into the categories of a primary safe system treatment or a supporting safe system treatment, which are the 2 sort of main key categories of ideas. So we've covered off the sort of safe system and the way that New Zealand's really going to help see this on the ground, and in people's vehicles and the like. And you have some wonderful principles in your strategic documentation. And so we've covered all that, and I feel really comfortable with this group from your quizzes and assignments and the discussion we've been having, that you're all got your head around that. I've seen, I suppose, or I'm confident people have moved away from sort of pillars and isolated bits of the system working on their own to a very integrated system, and people sort of understanding that interactivity between the elements of this system, and the fact that we need all of the elements of the system working for us to get us to our goals of elimination of death and serious injury, or getting us very close to that. So we've covered off that really well. The one that we really need to focus on in our matrix part of the system is this. So promote good choices, but plan for mistakes. And I really do like the way that you New Zealanders have phrased that, because we want to address the likelihood of a crash and try to absolutely minimize that through all the levers that we have of infrastructure and vehicles and people and culture and the like. But we need to plan for when that slips through and we do have an incident, and we need to manage the energy. So we're into the severity aspects, and the safe system assessment framework, even though it's a fairly simple way to look at things when you get into it, it's quite brilliant in the fact that it forces us to really focus on the severity of crashes as well, and that's a really good thing. So when we got into this idea of risk and the safe system definition of risk, us looking at the exposure to crashes and the likelihood and the severity. And so we talked a bit about the fact that the usual definition would just be that likelihood and severity. But in this one, we've separated out exposure. And this will be the one I think we continue to have a little bit of challenge on as we're doing these safe system assessments, because that exposure one, people really want to make it more than it is, at least under a safe system assessment. So what I'm going to put there is just a little numbers symbol. I want like a good way to help you guide you in knowing an exposure is to think, can I quantify that with a number of pedestrians, a number of cyclists, a number of vehicles. If you get into lengths or anything like that, it's really in the likelihood factors, just in the safe system assessment way of categorizing things, okay? There's been quite a bit of work over the last 3 years to try to clarify some of this, and that's part of the reason we have given you these fact sheets, because they were intricate little clarifications that just helped everybody get across on the same page. So we'll get into that a little bit more shortly. The severity, we've given those graphs and assistance for you to be able to do that, because I'll come back to that actually. So we've given these graphs, which were these sort of simplified versions of what we know at a very broad level of the different crash types, pedestrian and cyclists, right angle crashes and head-on crashes. And you know, we really want to be somewhere in this range for these before things start to get really bad really quickly. So that will help guide you and calibrate you in terms of the scoring. You can use the other tables from module 1 and 2 associated with angles of crashes for pedestrian, for passenger vehicle to passenger vehicle crashes, and side impact, with pole and pedestrian and cyclist crashes. And so I've put a few of these at the start of this module just to remind you, we've got some data, we've got some evidence, we've got some information, Now, Michael's put in some more information into the Schoology folder, and thank you for that, because that's good for us to continue to get more and more information around this, just to help us get really good quantification of the severity outcomes we're expecting in the crashes that we foresee. I haven't got it here, but I also provided that sort of heat spectrum generalized graph with some scores from 0 to 4 on it, which will possibly help you when you come to do your safe system assessment matrix. So I suggest you grab that one as well. So we're sort of arming ourselves there with a lot of information around the severity outcomes we expect from different crash types at different speeds with different road users involved. We've got some understanding of exposure, being the number of pedestrians, the number of cyclists, the number of vehicles, and the likelihood. We know a whole lot of factors that are going to influence our likelihood. And many of you have been doing this sort of stuff for many years, but understanding things like, have we got see-through effects at the intersection? Do we have sight distance? You know, are there trees blocking sight lines? Is the horizontal and vertical geometry good? Is the pavement surface good? You know, is it signalized or not signalized? Does it have appropriate warning? All of that sort of stuff is around the likelihood of crashes. So how do we actually take all of this sort of knowledge and information that we've got on the exposure to crashes, the likelihood of crashes, the severity of crashes, that intermingling system, that intertwined system that we've got, and put it into some sort of assessment report, so we can help guide projects or planning work to give us the best alignment with safe system. The best alignment with safe system possible. So this all really came about because of that. I was going to say early days of safe system, but it's not really early days, but probably about 2015, maybe 2013 or so. People were asking for, well, they would say things like, we only want projects that are safe system, and you know, people would scratch their head and they'd say, oh, what's that? And then people, you know, would be saying, well, you can't do that, it's not safe system. And so what we're taking is this sort of abstract idea, not an abstract idea, but a philosophy, and talking about it, about on-ground decisions. Now that's great, because that's how you take a philosophy to actual practical reality. You know, you want to put it on the ground, or, you know, change specific behaviors or the like. But the way it was sort of being progressed through was very odd. And then it just sort of became people's opinion on what was good and what was not good. And there was very sort of a very grey area around that. Now, I was sort of in Vic Roads in the early time. People were asking for these sorts of things, and had always thought I might step out and start a company at some point. And so just I just latched onto that and called the company Safe System Solutions, because I could see this sort of demand and need for understanding what is a safe system solution. Now, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, really, isn't it? Because a pure safe system solution is sort of almost a mythical thing. I mean, things that align really highly with safe system principles, yes. So maybe the company should have been called High Alignment with Safe System Principles Outcomes Proprietary Limited, but it probably doesn't have the same punch to it. So, but that was sort of where we could all see that this was something that people were wanting clarity around. And then we started in my early days with Safe System Solutions, we started doing a thing called a safe system audit. And the reason we did that was because everybody was happy with this road safety audit process and integrating that into projects and the like. And you wanted to sort of leverage off that and run with it. And we did quite a few of those, and then started having conversations with some others that were thinking in similar spaces. So people like Colin Brodie in New Zealand and Fergus Tate and others, and some others in Western Australia as well, David Moises, and saying, you know, what do we got here, and how can we provide this clarity? And luckily, sort of at the time, Austroads was taking on new projects, and the safe system assessment framework was the idea. And so Colin Brodie was the project, Austroads project leader on this one, and it was done by a raft of people, and it sort of came out that it was a way to assess an infrastructure project. Actually, I shouldn't just say infrastructure projects. It's a way of assessing things for their alignment with safe system principles. The reality is that most people are using it on infrastructure projects, but you'll see here in one of the sections, we've got the first thing is the purpose, the scale, and the depth of the assessment that you're going to do. Because the way that this has been set up means that you can do a safe system assessment on quite a variety of things. And they certainly have the ability to be done on remote communities, on mining sites, on whole programs, for example. So you can do a whole lot of things with it. The majority of safe system assessments are done on a infrastructure project that's being planned, be that a congestion management project, a public transport project, a road safety project, or whatever the purpose of it is, but that's the majority. So Austroads came out and managed to put together this safe system assessment framework, and it was released in late 2016. And since then, it's really started being used, and it's getting quite a bit of traction. And people have found some areas that some improvement is required, and certainly that is the case. And I was on the working group for this, and there was some acknowledgement of some of the things that could be challenges, but it hadn't really played out. So there will be some improvements with it going forward. In the interim, we're providing some fact sheets to help everybody get on the same page, and then training and the like to help ensure that we understand this. So we talked about getting that project context, because we need to understand a project, an idea, a community, an area before we jump into doing the assessment. But the main reason you want to get an understanding of that is not to sort of quantify your assessment. It's really to help make meaningful suggestions to the project team or the mine managers or whatever it is, to have changes that will integrate with their many objectives of projects. And I'll get back to that in a second. We then have the matrix that needs to be filled out. And as I say, that's usually the meat of a safe system assessment. It gets us some numbers, some graphs, some quantification. And then we get into ideas and suggestions to improve things. Now, a couple of jurisdictions jumped out and started producing their own guidance after the Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework came out. And that was after a couple of years of, I suppose, practitioners doing it and feeding back and wanting a bit more clarity on different things. So we've got the Victorian document, the South Australian document, which we've put into your memory stick, and on Schoology, so you can have a flick through those. There's a lot of the same stuff that Austroads has produced, but also some a bit more clarity in a few areas. So what we'll be doing is, I suppose, a safe system assessment that conforms with these guidelines and the Austroads document. And New Zealand will craft your own sort of path on how these are done, as you get more and more people skilled up in this process, and being done in more and more projects, which I think you'll find some tweaks and some refinements in how it fits in with your road safety audit process, and which projects it's best to do, and what stages of projects, and those sorts of things. But that'll all play out. But what we'll do is get everybody to be able to do safe system assessments in accordance with these guidelines and the Austroads, and then we'll go from there. Now, I'll pause there, and I'll see if anybody's got any questions or comments at this stage.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, we've got a question who might be answering their own question as well. How do we get to zero harm when through the safe system we are still accepting 10% probability of fatal crashes? And then a follow-up comment to that, is that where the other elements of the safe system need to pick up the residual risk for the remaining 10%?
Yeah, so there's a few theories on that. Well, you know, why pick the 10%? It's a fair question. We've all agreed that you know, it's ethically unacceptable to, you know, peg a line that says we're going to kill and seriously injure some people. So I suppose there's three things that I think about with this. The first one is the way those graphs play out is that exponential increase. So let's go back to them actually, because it helps to have a look at it. That exponential increase is really around that 10%. So it's saying that, you know, as we pull things back, we get less benefit from about this point. It you know, really kicks up really quickly at this certain point. So that's one thing in terms of, but that still doesn't really give us the you know, comfort in our ethical trade-off, because there's still people in there. The second one is absolutely that acknowledgement that we're just, you know, we're thinking about infrastructure and these sorts of things, and hopefully other elements of the system are going to be kicking in and helping out and reducing the likelihood of crashes and the like, and we're going to get better technology which will bring these curves down and those sorts of things. So yes, the other elements of the system are going to be playing a role as well. And the third one, I suppose, I would say that we're on a journey here, and if we to a degree, a lot of, I think, people, practitioners out there start to switch off when we talk about these speeds at the 10% death rate. I think we've got some people on board on some of them. The 30 kilometres for pedestrians seems to be more acceptable. The 50 km/h side impact, when we're talking about rural roads and side roads and the like, people are just sort of going, you know, you can't do that. I mean, we run these at 100 and they've got side roads everywhere, and we've got, you know, this is, and the 70 again, the head on, it's sort of quite a high speed compared to where we're coming from. So to a degree, I kind of feel we're starting out here, and then we may open it up to some of the serious injury and the like. But where I think we're sitting at the moment on New Zealand roads is very far from achieving these sorts of speeds where these crashes are possible. And if we can bring everything to there, we're starting to move in the right direction. But I do agree with the point, and it always sort of is something that worries me a little bit in terms of, well, what about what's under here? Have we just ignored that? So, but you can take that into account in your safe system assessment, because you'll see shortly, instead of giving a score of 0 when it sits below those severity levels, which would be saying that nothing's going to, there'll be no death and serious injury, you could give a score of a 1 or a 0.5, which would acknowledge that there will still be some severity outcomes. It's just likely that a lot of people involved in crashes will be able to walk away or have a minor injury, but some may be more severely injured. Anything else, Kathy? No? Okay. So the first thing you tend to do in a safe system assessment is to utilize these context prompt questions, which are in the Austroads document and in the Victorian and South Australian guidance. And they basically are a series of questions to understand the context of the project. What is it, what's happening, or why is this happening, or what is this area that we're looking at? And you'll see there the questions of things like, what is the reason for the project? What's the function of the road? What's the speed environment? What road users are present? What is the vehicle composition? And lots of sub questions under that. And what I will tend to do is either have a little workshop meeting with the project team and run through each of these and get them to explain the background and why things are happening, and what's the land use of the area, what are the current speed limits, what are the proposed speed limits, what are the intersection typeways for public transport, where are the desire lines for pedestrians, all of this sort of stuff. Where are the schools, and then sort of provide that documentation within the Safe System Assessment report. Understanding any movement and place functions or the like is also an important part of this. So you build that picture and then you plonk that into your report. Sometimes, if it's a group that I've been doing lots of safe system assessments for, they kind of know the drill, and I'll send them the questions in a Word document and say, fill that out, and then we'll start to look at it, because their documentation usually in these planning phases has quite a good amount of this information that they can just grab and plonk in. So then you've got that information, and you want to start by doing a safe system assessment matrix on the existing conditions. Okay, so this is assuming you're assessing a project. You do the existing conditions. So you put the plans aside and you get out there, and just the way you did in that module 2 exercise, you just look at the intersection as it is. And the safe system assessment matrix is broken up into 3 rows: exposure, likelihood, and severity. Okay, good. That is the reason why I've been banging on about exposure, likelihood, and severity for all these modules, because they're the key 3 rows in your safe system assessment. The columns of a safe system assessment are the different crash types that cause all the trauma on our road network. And so they are runoff road, so vehicles, this is passenger vehicles or potentially heavy vehicles leaving the road and striking something, okay? Or rolling over as well. So that's runoff road. Head on is obviously leaving their lane, striking a vehicle that is also traveling straight on that road. So if the vehicle is making a turn and you strike the one you're imagining strikes the front of the vehicle, but the vehicle is in a turning maneuver of some description, that's an intersection crash, so not a head-on. Even if it hits the front of the vehicle, but it was sort of because of they were trying to turn. But these are passenger vehicles as well, or heavy vehicles potentially. Intersection. Intersection is anything that involves one vehicle making a turn maneuver, or at a crossroads or the like, vehicles that strike at those angles from different roads. And again, this is passenger vehicles. So these are all about passenger vehicle crashes. Other is a category to capture anything that has been missed in these three or the next three, which are our vulnerable road users, which we'll get to in a second. Actually, no, I'll do the vulnerable road users now. I'll come back to other. So pedestrian are any crashes where the pedestrian is the one that gets the serious injury outcome. So if a pedestrian is crossing the road at an intersection and they are struck by a vehicle, that is a pedestrian crash in this, not an intersection crash. So you're thinking about the sort of crash type we're talking about with the injured party. A cyclist, if a cyclist, in your vision of a crash you're worried about, if a cyclist was to leave the road and strike a tree, if that's what you're worried about, that's a cyclist crash, not a run-off road crash in this matrix. And a motorcyclist, again, anything. If a vehicle is to leave the road, leave their lane, and have a head-on crash with a motorcyclist, that actually fits into our motorcycle category, not our head-on category. But odds on, if you're thinking about that, it's going to influence your head-on because there'll be other vehicles as well. But motorcyclists, you're going to think about as a distinct element. So they're those ones. And then the other covers anything that's been missed. So it could be a railway level crossing, it could be crashes with animals, it could be side swipe, rear end. Well, it could be rear end if the rear end hasn't sort of started from an intersection congestion style issue. So maybe a mid-block crossing point or or the like. So what you do in a safe system assessment is actually with the other, you tend to explain in your matrix what crash type you're talking about. So maybe, you've got a particular worry about rear end, so you would write that in. So they're the crash types, the exposure, the likelihood and severity. And so then each cell of the matrix you populate with a score between 0 and 4. And there are some scoring sheets available to do this, to help you. So you're going to go through and you're going to say, what factors influence the exposure to a crash, the likelihood of the crash, and the severity of the crash? And in a safe system assessment matrix, we dot point all of those. So these are just a bit of a guide. Now, don't get too confused with the length of segment. I mean, it gets a bit messy when we start doing with that too much. Really focus on that AADT. You'll see here, these are just a few ideas that you might want to look at. Speed, geometry, shoulders, presence of barriers, hazard offsets, and the like, speed, roadside features, and the like for the severity. But you'll see severity, speed, 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 impact angles, and presence of heavy vehicles and the like will also influence your severity. And you've got a bit of practice at understanding which characteristics influence these in your first assignment. So I mentioned this scoring reference sheet. Now this is in the Austroads document, it's in the Victorian South Australian guidance, and we've provided it to you a number of times. It's going to help calibrate what is a score of 0 for each cell of that matrix, what is a score of 1, what's a score of 2, what's a score of 3, and what's a score of 4. And it has it for the exposure, the likelihood, and the severity. So what you're doing is using this sheet and looking at the site and populating in here lots of things that might influence these and a final score. So you might say, I've got a exposure score of 1, and I've got a likelihood score of 2, and I've got a severity score of 4. for example. So that what that would be saying is that I've got fairly low traffic volume of cars on this road. I've got a fairly good environment in terms of stopping people leaving the road. So maybe the line marking's okay. It's got some sealed shoulders. It's got good delineation. Skid resistance seems okay. So the road environment isn't sort of encouraging people to leave the road, but there's certainly still going to be the presence of people leaving the road, because humans are going to make mistakes, and people are going to be distracted and fall asleep and still leave the road. So we can't say that there's no likelihood of it happening, but it's sort of on the lower end. But maybe the speeds are a little bit high, conducive to that. So maybe the speeds are 80 kilometers an hour or something. And then the severity of saying, oh, okay, well, no, there's trees next to the road, there's culverts, and there's no barrier systems, or there's little bits of barrier system, but it's generally going to be quite a severe outcome when people leave the road. And I'm looking back to my graphs on the severity outcomes, and I see that leaving the road and hitting a tree, somewhere even in the order of 40 or 50 kilometers per hour is going to be highly severe, and we're running at 80 kilometers an hour. So I was thinking, okay, this is going to be bad. So I'm going to go all the way at the high end of a 4 for the severity, the highest severity outcomes when these people leave the road in their cars and they crash with trees or culverts and the like. So you go through and you fill that out for all of these in the same manner, and then you multiply. You multiply your exposure times your likelihood times your severity to give you a total score down the bottom here out of 64 for each of your specific crash types. So in this case, we'd be going 1 times 2 times 4, and so we've got 8 out of 64 for runoff road. And you go through it and you do this for each of these, and you dot point all these reasons why you've arrived at this score, and you get all these scores down here, and you add them up. You add your 8 plus your whatever, plus whatever, plus whatever, plus whatever, and you get a final score out of 448 by adding up all of those. So you get some score out of 448, which is your alignment with safe system principles from the matrix. Now, the ultimate pure perfect alignment with safe system principles would be a score of 0. I've never seen a matrix spit out a 0. We're a long way from that, and I suppose part of the reason for that are the fact that there's limitations on what's out there at the moment and what even people have been proposing, and we've still got to acknowledge here genuine people behaving like people. So when you say if you say there's very low likelihood of people leaving the road, you still need to acknowledge the behaviors that we're still currently seeing out there. In this matrix, you can put things that are not infrastructure related that are influencing these scores. So you might, in your likelihood score, be jotting down things like a high level of hoon behavior. Actually, hoon's a very Victorian, Australian term. What do you call them? Like boy races or something, I think is the term New Zealanders use. But that might be an increase in your likelihood of runoff road crashes. Say it's a known boy racer area or the like. You can talk to the police. You can say, "What do you know about this area that we're looking at?" And they may know some things. You could put because the safe system assessment framework is so scalable. You can be talking about the fleet of vehicles that you know use that area influencing the severity outcomes. You know, you say this community, this whole area uses a very, you know, the standard of safety features is very low, so we expect the severity outcomes of these crashes to be higher. So you can push more into this matrix than simply the, you know, were there barriers or not barriers. It can be much richer than that. And it can acknowledge that interaction and many elements of the safe system. The reason these numbers start with a 0, I think, is quite, so one of my comments in the working group was, okay, if we give numbers to technical people that we're going to give this to, they're going to run this within an inch of its life. You know, the obsession on numbers will be huge. And we'll start to see these come back with like 6 decimal places and the like. And to a degree, we did see that start to come out. I was, you know, starting to do it and enjoying trying to refine these numbers down, really being really precise. But the intention was never to have these as, you know, that sort of precision of numbers. They're a broad brush, almost like your low risk, medium risk, high risk, and tolerable risk style numbers. But the reason they use numbers was because of this ability to multiply. And there's a little bit of beauty in putting a 0 as your first number, because as all of you will know, if you multiply anything by 0, you get 0. And so if you are able to put a 0 here, which is very hard if you're dealing with the road, but nonetheless, if there is no exposure to a crash, let's go with intersection, that's easier. There's no exposure to the intersection crashes because there's no intersections potentially. You've got a mid-block location, so there's no exposure to an intersection crash. It doesn't matter what the likelihood or the severity is because there's nobody exposed to that crash. If you are able to put a 0 in likelihood, which, as I say, at the moment is fairly almost impossible because we're dealing with humans making mistakes and the like. So usually it's a small number, even if you've got everything in the infrastructure right. But if, in theory, you can put a 0 on the likelihood of crashes, you wouldn't care how many are exposed to crashes and what the severity of the crash was, because there are no crashes happening. There is no likelihood of a crash. And the final one here is the 0 in severity. And I always put a little disclaimer on this. If you've analyzed the energies in these predicted crashes that are going to happen and said, when all these crashes happen, it's going to be minor injury at the worst. People are going to walk away, panel beater, that sort of stuff. Under the sort of safe system, we don't care the likelihood or the exposure, because when all these crashes happen, the community health outcomes are far, far less, and we're seeing not this debilitating trauma that's happening. And my little disclaimer on this one is basically saying that, you know, if you've got these situations where you had a 4 and a 4 and a 0 here, you'd probably want to have a look at something in here, because you're going to have a lot of, you know, minor crashes and traffic disruption and annoyance and the like. But, you know, in a pure sort of safe system thinking, we understand crashes are still going to happen. But I would work on that anyway. So that idea of putting numbers to it and having that ability to have a 0 somewhere or low numbers and the fact that they multiply gives us some pretty neat outcomes when you use numbers. And that's why numbers were chosen. And there's another little benefit that I don't think anybody on the working group or the project team or was fully sort of aware of. But there is huge power in us putting forward a report that has numbers and graphs. And it sort of clicked to me. I mean, it clicks to me when the traffic modeling reports, are placed when you're developing a project or the like. And there's so much sort of inbuilt acceptance, or just yep, absolutely. Like, it's, the numbers have said a level of service C will happen, or a level of service A will happen as a result of these signals, and nobody's, it's just such ironclad. That's the modeling. That's a traffic model. Everybody's now, those who've done traffic modeling, and I haven't done a lot, but I certainly have lots of good traffic modelers that I work with and the like, and they tell me, and so others can expand on this probably, that you're making assumptions in there, and there's a little bit of inbuilt assumptions in different aspects of it, and a little bit of grey, and you can tweak things around a little bit. So, but nobody's really questioning that in a major way. But when we've been putting our road safety advice forward as just really sort of opinion-based stuff with our level of knowledge and backup and evidence, but nonetheless, it's sort of us saying, we think that this intersection is dangerous. We often get pushback, and we say, well, no, we don't think it's dangerous. There hasn't been a crash history, and these sorts of things. We go, well, okay, but but the power of now us putting some numbers to it, and the fact that the numbers pop, 448, it sounds very specific and precise, and you'll see some of the graphs that you can produce, or that we like to produce in these safe system assessments. It seems to be getting much more traction in us being able to leverage some areas that haven't been too willing to take on change. So yeah, that's been good. But the quantification and getting you to these scores, let's start with 1. We'll come back to 0. So 1, exposure. The volume of vehicles that might be involved in a particular crash type, so they're your columns, is particularly low. Therefore, the exposure is low. For run-off road, head-on, and other crash types, the AADT is less than 1,000 vehicles a day. For pedestrian, cyclists, motorcyclists, traffic volumes are less than 10 units per day. And that's 10 crossing the road or walking along exposed to these different crash types. So that's quite low. We go up a bit, and maybe we go to, let's say, a 3 for exposure. For run-off road, head-on, and other, it's between 5,000 and 10,000. That's your AADT that you're looking at. Cyclists, pedestrians, motorcyclists, between 50 and 100. So you can see we've just got straight up numbers, straight up volumes. Now, what we would do in that early part of gathering the context of a safe system assessment is to say to the project team, what do you got for me? What's your traffic volume? What are your pedestrian counts? What are your cyclist counts? What are your motorcyclist counts? What are your predictions on that? What have you modeled? What's it going to go to in the future? Now, my experience is that they'll go, here's 20 years worth of traffic volume and percentage of heavy vehicles, and we got no idea how many pedestrians or cyclists or motorcyclists. So that's probably an insight into some other things that we are very focused on counting a lot of that. Some areas are getting much better at giving us pedestrian and cyclist and motorcyclist data, but nonetheless, what you would do in those situations if they were to say that, like, I don't know how many pedestrians there are. It's there's a shopping centre there, and I don't know, some pedestrians. There's essentially lots of pedestrians. You would on your site visit, and you'd have a look, and you'd maybe ask around, and then you'd make a call, and you'd make a call on it based on the fact that this says the volumes are, where does it say it? High, and the volumes are moderate, and very high. So you're going to make a judgment call on it based on what you're seeing and your predictions. Now, you will see as I progress this through to when you're analysing a design, the initial existing conditions score that you get is just setting you a baseline score. And what we're really interested in is the relativity between the baseline existing score and the design score. So as long as the same team is doing the existing conditions and the design, it doesn't really matter if you've decided to go a 3 or a 4 on your pedestrian volumes, as long as you're consistent in the way you think about that going forward. I'll go through the likelihood score and the severity score, and then I'll open it up for some questions. So road user exposure, if you are given the volumes, is very clear cut because you've been told a range, a numbers. This is just what's the volume, where does it apply to, and you just plug that number in. Then you get to the likelihood score. Now, likelihood is really quite subjective. So this is where I see that people really need to justify how they've arrived at this number. So in a safe system assessment matrix, you don't just plonk a number down. You have to dot point all the things that you thought about that made you want to make that a high number, and all the things you wanted to make it a lower number. So you might look at your intersection and you say, well, it's high speed, so that makes me want to make it higher. But it's got really good delineation, so that makes me want to make it go lower a bit. But, the surface is not looking good. It looks kind of like it's got flushing, and the skid resistance is bad, so that makes me want to make the number a bit higher. And you might say, well, it's signalized, so that makes me want to make the likelihood score a little bit lower. And you say, but the signals are a bit hard to see on the approach, so that makes me want to make it a little bit higher. So you're dotting all through these different things for your likelihood score. Dot point them all out in terms of the ones that make you want to make that score higher and you want to make that score lower, and then you arrive at your score. And you'll see here that for the information you get is fairly broad here. It is highly unlikely that a given crash type will occur. That's a 1. Up at a 3, it is likely that a given crash type will occur. So you're not going to get much information there, do you? But don't get too concerned by this lack of guidance, because remember, this is a relative scoring exercise. Do that existing conditions first, and then when we score the design, it's all about how it alters. A 4 gets a bit more information. The likelihood of individual road user error leading to a crash is high given the infrastructure in place, e.g. high approach speeds to a sharp curve, priority movement control filtering, right turn across several opposing lanes, and high speed. So I tend to reserve the use of a 4 for where I see some, the road environment really almost encouraging a crash in some description or another, turning across multiple lanes of high-speed traffic on a driver's own choice, or really bad sight lines to a curve or something like that. These sorts of things, and then this is where road safety auditors tend to absolutely shine, and they have this really rich, great description of the factors in there that have increased risk and increased likelihood of crash, decreased likelihood of crash, and come up with a really nice explanation of how they've arrived at this score. Then the crash severity. This is where we have some quantification, but we also need a little bit of judgment, a little bit of subjectivity to it as well. So it's somewhere in between these two. And this is, for example, here, let's take a 3. Should a crash occur, it is likely that it will result in fatality or serious injury for any road user involved. Kinetic energies are moderate, but are not effectively dissipated before reaching the road user. And really that last little bit's talking about like a barrier system or something that's going to, you know, absorb energy, dissipate it over time before it reaches the occupant of that vehicle. If we look at the sort of zeros, we're saying here that there is no exposure. There's no pedestrians, no cyclists, no motorcyclists, or there's no intersections. Now, pretty rare to do this. Maybe motorways for cyclists, maybe mid-block areas where there are no intersections. Maybe if you've got like a rigid barrier system down the middle of the road that really is going to stop any penetration and head-on crashes, you might put a 0 for head-on. I tend to not put a 0 for head-on if it's a flexible barrier system because of the, you know, there is a small chance that we will get a larger vehicle that will penetrate that or go through it. But mind you, my exposure score would still be whatever the traffic volume is. My likelihood score would be really, really small because the majority that leave their lane going towards a head-on are going to be contained by the barrier system and not get through there. So you'd leave your exposure score at the traffic volume influence, and your likelihood would come down. If though you thought no, that barrier is going to contain all the vehicles that leave their lane, then you would alter the exposure score. The likelihood, there is only minimal chance that a given crash type will occur for an individual road user given the infrastructure in place. Only extreme driving behaviour with substantial vehicle failure could lead to a crash. This might mean, for example, that 2 traffic streams do not cross at grade, or pedestrians do not cross the road. Now, this one is really, I suppose, there gets more and more clarity around this, and we do need to acknowledge sort of who's using the road, how it's being used on an everyday basis. So as I say, I don't think I have ever actually used a 0 for likelihood. Now, this will give you a little insight into what I want to say next. I have used a 0.5. But that's as far as you're allowed to go with decimal places. Well, at least in the Victorian and the South Australian guidance. The Australian document doesn't give any information about that. The 0.5 is the max that those two jurisdictions allow in terms of splitting this up. And we don't encourage it. We try to stick to whole numbers because it's a broad brush assessment methodology, but if you absolutely must, you can go to a 0.5. And then a 0, you know, should the crash occur, there's only minimal chance that it result in fatality or serious injury for relevant road users. This might mean kinetic energies are transferred during the crash or low, or they're dissipated. So again, this one, you can be more likely in some low speed environments to potentially put a 0 for severity. Okay, so what you do, and I'm going to pause, Kathy, for questions in just a second, is you've got that score sheet, you looked at the individual site, you populate it with a whole lot of dot points in each of these of things that you've noticed out there and that influence the score. You've put your scores in, and you've got your existing condition score. And then you copy this whole matrix for the existing conditions, all populated with all that information and scores. You paste it, and then you look at your design and you say, right, this is what they're planning to do. How has it changed the matrix? And you start crossing things out if they're not relevant anymore. You say, okay, well, you know, they're putting a roundabout at this intersection now, and it looks like it's, you know, all designed well and the speeds will be down. So I'm going to cross out intersection speed as one of the things that influences me wanting to make that score higher because they brought those down. And in fact, I'm going to put it in as one of the things that makes it bring my intersection likelihood down because the speeds are going to be quite low on the approach. Or they're resheeting the whole pavement. Now I had the likelihood of because the skid resistance I thought was bad, or it was looking really bad, I had that in, making the score go up a little bit. I'm crossing that out because that's now gone, and the skid resistance will be great. And so you go about adjusting these and crossing things out and adding new things in, and you change the scores as well. So you go through and you do it again, basically, on this new one, but you base it off that existing conditions. And I'm just going to, oh no. I'll pause there, Kathy, take a few questions, and then I'm going to show you a worked example of this with the graphs that you produce.
Thanks, Ken. Okay, we had same question from two different people. Would you use a location's existing crash history to help determine the likelihood component?
I might look at that. If there was no crash history, it's, I'm definitely not going to put or have that be the sole factor that influences anything, but it may add to my understanding of some of the scoring. But remember that crash history is going to be sort of a product of all three of these: the exposure, the likelihood, and the severity. So how you would apportion that is a bit of a challenge. But yes, I mean that could be one of the factors that you could put in there to almost validate a bit of your choices. But certainly, if there's if you haven't looked at the crash history at all, you can do a perfectly valid safe system assessment matrix just based on all the characteristics we know that present an increase in exposure, likelihood, and severity of crashes. But yeah, it might be something that you could add in. But do be careful not to be reactive in the use of this to just say, well, no crashes, thus likelihood of crashes is 0. That would be a very bad use of the safe system assessment framework.
Okay, thank you. Scoring for exposure. What if pedestrian numbers are very high but vehicles are low? For example, a high place value. Would you score low as not many vehicles?
No. So that's a really good question. If you had huge volumes of pedestrians, let me use my matrix. Your pedestrian score is going to end up being a 4 still. And there's like no hardly any vehicles to strike these pedestrians, then your likelihood score might be a 0.5. And the biggest factor influencing that is not many vehicles. So yeah, this is where it starts to get a little bit intricate and tricky, because then you're going to have your vehicle scores will be low over here. So that would be make it 0.5 or whatever it is. I'm using 0.5 because I don't want to use a 0. Or a 1 or whatever you've decided it is. And your likelihood in this case could still be like a 4 if you've decided there's lots of chance of crash for some reason. Now, I dare say, hopefully, if you've got an area that's heavily pedestrianised like this, and you wouldn't have a 4 there because the speeds would ideally be low. But at this pure just numbers perspective, it's a really great question. So your number of vehicles can influence your pedestrian likelihood score or cyclist likelihood score, because there's less chance of that crash type occurring. Good question. And that is the topic of, is that a topic of one of the fact sheets? I think it's a topic of one of those 6 fact sheets we've provided.
Excellent. Does the matrix give a bias to making the road environment safer for cars rather than bicycles?
These are some of the things that are being looked at with much more scrutiny these days. I would say, I don't know. I think you've got to make that determination when you use it in different road environments. The reason I sort of and ah about that is you'll discover that the numbers in terms of the exposure numbers for cyclists are quite low to trigger high scores. But we've got these categories here. So what do we got? 4 categories which are focused on motor vehicles, and only the 1 category which is focused on cyclists. But this comes a little bit to how you use the outputs of these safe system assessments. And I'm going to talk about that in the next module after you've sort of been using it. But you'll see sort of people. We don't want people to use it in certain ways, and hopefully it shouldn't do that. But I think it's a valid point, and it's something we can continue to work on refining. Anything else, Kathy?
Yes. Before you look at a design, would you use a broad brush safe system assessment framework for selecting a preferred design option from a long list and a short list?
Yes. That's a great time to do safe system assessments, is when you've got options on the table. And I very much enjoy doing that. In fact, this work example I'm going to take you through has options on the table. And it's a great little tool for optioneering, and then also injecting further safe system alignment into the project.
Great, that's all for now. Thank you.
So let's look at a matrix. And now I've picked one which was a fairly simplistic one to try to, for training purposes, keep everything simple. And I don't expect you to read all the words in this one, but I just want to show you sort of the output products you might be thinking. And some of them are much more elaborate than this, but this one, you can see there that exposure here, there's not many words, because it's just saying that this is the traffic volume. And I've looked at the score sheet and I've given it a 3 out of 4 because that's what it is. You hopefully, what have we got here? So the other, you'll see there's a little bit more information because it's actually defining what these other crash types are: mid-block, rear end, and side swipe. Also got a 3 because it's traffic volume driven. And then a little bit of info on pedestrian, cyclists, and motorcyclists. Now, in fact, this one seems to have got 3 across the board for exposure. So there you go. Likelihood, you can see here, it's got these 2 groups: factors that increase the likelihood of crashes, factors that decrease the likelihood of crashes. And they're dot pointed out. And you can dot point as many as you want. And dot points there. And then there's a score. Okay, and this one's got a 2.5. Now, again, I encourage you not to go to a decimal point, 0.5, if you can stop doing it. I dare say that my experience is when you're in a safe system assessment team and there's big debate between a 2 and a 3, to keep things moving along, it goes to a 0.5 to keep everybody calm and happy. And in a sense, because we're dealing here with the existing conditions, we're not absolutely concerned with exactly that precision on numbering. We want to get everybody very comfortable and happy with it. It's all going to be about that relative change with the different options available. And then severity, you can see there increase and decrease. And so dot pointing out what increases, what decreases, and these could be factors that are associated with the speed and the infrastructure. It could also be you go, well, actually, this area's got a lot of older road users and they're more frail, and so we think that when some of these, pedestrian crashes happen, maybe they're going to be more severe. So you can even factor some of that into here. Now, the beauty of this sort of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe a 0.5 is that minor tweaks aren't going to give you enough to alter that score. So this is a big sort of picture, broad brush. And I really like that aspect of it, because what we do see is projects tweaking around the edges and sort of feeling that they've achieved their safe system principles by adding a warning sign. You go, yeah, okay. The warning sign on the approach to the intersection, I'll put that in there as one of the factors that decreases, but I'm only going to say that at most that's going to be a 0.5 reduction. And then maybe they say, well, we're going to put 2 warning signs, one on each side of the road. And at that point, I'm going, well, it's not actually going to, minuscule little decrease in likelihood again, not even enough to give me a whole 0.5 reduction off that. So we're starting to see that this draws us into actual things that are going to get us that step change we're looking for in reduction. Otherwise, they're not going to be enough to, tick over that that change in your score. So I'm just going to use this example. It's an intersection. It's on a outskirts of a town, and downhill, 1 lane in each direction. There's some pictures of the intersection as it is now. Just give way controlled intersection. Could be anywhere in Australia or New Zealand. It's got some drainage infrastructure around it. It's got some power poles, not really sealed shoulders. And the options that have been put forward are a roundabout, a 1 lane roundabout, a set of traffic signals on a modified T. So that's where this road has, not priority, it continues around as it's currently, the current geometry is, or a straight T intersection with traffic signals. Now, this is probably a nice stage to do a safe system assessment. You've got a bit of detail, but they don't given full detail, and they're not so far into their project that they're not going to take any changes on. And they've got some options that they've laid out, because they're trying to work out what is the best outcome here for the community. So you've done your existing conditions, so you've gone out there, and now you're taking that and you're looking at your design options. And so I put little symbols up here to make it easy for the reader to know which design option this is. And then you'll see there that there's strike-throughs, or for things that have been removed from the area as a result of the new roundabout. And some red text on things that have come in. And they could be things that have decreased the risk, or they could possibly be new things that might have increased the risk. So, these different things could come into that. So that's you go through and you strike things out, you add new things in, you make any changes in the score and make them a different color so so people know what's changed. Then you take your existing conditions again and you do it for the next one. So there's your modified T signals, crossing out this, adding this, altering this, and you've got some new scores. And you do it then for as many options as you'd like. Crossing this out, adding this, making it clear what's changed. And then you can start to get these whole numbers out, and you can see here the overarching, the existing conditions. We had a score of 118.5 out of 448. The roundabout brings it down to 90. The signals brings it down to 99. The signals on the modified T is 99. Signals of the standard T is 105. So from this immediately, we know that the roundabout is going to give the best alignment with safe system principles. All the options get us a better alignment with safe system principles. And so you can sort of graph that and show the total overall score. But this is what we like to see, and this is what people are looking for in the sort of executive summary up front in the, really clearly showing. Now, you don't need to do these sort of coloured things, but you want to see this graph. And so in this, we've got the existing conditions in red for each of the crash types: run-off road, head-on, intersection, other, peds, cyclists, motorcyclists. And we see that the orange in this case is around the roundabout option. The blue is the signals with the modified T. The grey is the T intersection. And we can see here straight away at a glance, I can go, all right, we're getting the big benefits out of the roundabout, obviously, at the intersection score, but we've got some issues with cyclists at that one. So if they run ahead with that, I'm going to be saying, what are we going to do to bring that as far down as we possibly can? And you can, see some different outputs. It's it paints quite a picture with just this this graph, and it looks very sort of precise, and it gets a lot of traction. So once you've done that, you don't stop there. That's not the end of the assessment, because for each option that is put on the table, you suggest how they can bring these as far down as possible. To get these as down as possible. So whichever one they end up choosing, they know how they can do better. Hopefully they're going to choose the one that starts out low and bring things even further down. But they may end up, for one reason or another, having to choose this one, and you want to be able to help assist in bringing that score down. And so you recommend things. Now, you recommend things, and you categorize anything you recommend into a primary treatment or a supporting treatment. The non-safe system treatment you would not be recommending, hopefully. However, it's in there for terminology purposes. If you needed to talk about something and you wanted to use that non-safe system treatment. But a primary treatment is any road planning, design, or management considerations that virtually eliminate the potential for fatal and serious injury occurring in association with the foreseeable crash type. So whatever crash type you're particularly thinking about in that. Virtually eliminate. So the things we tend to categorize in that are things that bring speeds down really low, barrier systems, continuous barrier systems. These really big, meaty things that we really know will bring those numbers very, very low. The supporting treatments are road planning, design, and management considerations that improve the overall level of safety associated with a foreseeable crash type, but are not expected to virtually eliminate the potential for fatal or serious injury crash. So we know these are going to be the things like warning signs, the lines, skid resistance improvements, sealed shoulders. We know these things improve road safety, but we know if we get all of that right, we're still going to have death and serious injury. And it does not change the ability for a primary treatment to be implemented in the future. So that's a little intricacy, but if you're putting something in that stops you being able to get this primary treatment in the future, it doesn't fit really as a supporting, or of course anything that would increase in terms of a crash or the severity of the crash. My little rule of thumb here is if you haven't addressed speed or dissipation of energy, speed / energy, I'll go with energy, you're unlikely to have a primary treatment. So you really got to be thinking about that severity. Have we influenced that severity score? And I think that's a good point to pause to take some questions on the matrix, the recommendations, and then I'll do this last one, which is talking about tying it all together with those many other elements of the safe system.
Thank you, Ken. As comment here, we also talk about a step towards supporting treatments. So that can improve the ability for a primary treatment to be implemented in the future.
Yes, that is very good, and somebody's been obviously heavily involved in this. So there is in the Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework a category within this called a step towards treatment, and it's exactly as said there. It is something you do that improves road safety and will help you get that primary treatment in the future. The Victorian and the South Australian guidelines have removed that because of industry's inability to understand that nuance to it. I've removed it in this to sort of try to simplify it to a degree, but if you want to use it as an option or a categorization when you categorize your treatments, you're more than welcome to. I think it's good, and the intention of it's good. I think, yeah, just we've found that people have so much trouble in understanding which category things fit in anyway, let alone adding that even more complicated category. So what does help you a little bit though is that the Austroads Safe System Assessment Framework has a whole list of treatments for every crash type and pre-categorizes them for you. So it can help calibrate your thinking on which category things might go in. Thanks, Kathy.
Thanks, Ken. If the scores of options have hardly improved the score from an existing conditions, does that ever cause reconsideration of a project from a value for money perspective? For example, spend the money on non-infrastructure safety improvements.
It could do that. It could be used for many purposes and guide people. I mean, a lot of these projects have many objectives. They have, you know, public transport, active transport, encouragement objectives. They have a whole lot of, you know, maybe environmental objectives and these sorts of things. And what we see though is the ability for us to inject this and say that, yeah, well, that's not going to get us closer to safe system principles in any meaningful way, may spark a major change to the design, which would be good to see. It could, yeah, possibly even mean that they go, well, it's not actually what we want to be doing then, and then let's reconsider. So it could be that.
What about on the flip side? Can you share any experiences you've had with proposed upgrades increasing the SSA score from existing conditions, particularly for projects that will increase movement of people and goods?
Okay, so there's a couple of things there. So first one, yes, there's been projects that increase the scores, and so take us further away from safe system principles, and those have been major duplications often in terms of ripping roundabouts out and putting in traffic signals and no speed calming. So yeah, the likelihood score has gone down a little bit, but the severity score just shot up, and so there's bad outcomes there. In order to keep the relativity to a degree, any volume increases you predict, you would do existing conditions matrices on the future volumes as well as the future project in order to give you a like-for-like comparison. So what you wouldn't do is look at your existing conditions, your existing volumes, and then get a 20-year model on what it's going to be like and compare the existing with the 20-year model in terms of those exposure scores, because you're not really comparing like for like there. So what you would do is you'd say existing conditions are this, and you would either say, well, and if no volume increase and they build exactly that, that's what it's going to come out at, or in the future it's going to be you know, much higher volume, and that's where we're going to get it to. It doesn't, to a degree, account for your latent demand and those sorts of factors, which you might need to put into the sort of qualitative commentary. So by latent demand, I mean, you know, if you build it, they will come. So you can account for that to a degree with doing an existing conditions on predicted volumes, but that intricacy of if you build it, they will come doesn't quite mash into that. So again, it's probably one that could get a bit more work and a bit more thinking from some smart people about how to integrate that in a really good way.
One more question. I'm not quite sure if I've got this question right, but what happens if you isolate or remove hazards? For example, close a side road.
Yeah. Okay. So if you close a side road, it would potentially remove or make your exposure score to intersection crashes 0. So we'll just use this one. If their option was to close this road, we would see that, if they had one option to close this road, we would see that score go to 0 there, because the exposure would be 0, done. There's no exposure to intersection crashes. But what we do is at an intersection like this, there's still the runoff road, the head-on, the other that we're thinking about, because the intersection itself, so the intersection crashes are simply the crashes vehicle to vehicle at that intersection. Pedestrians, so we've closed the road now, well, pedestrians are still going to need to cross, or will be crossing there and there. We've reduced the likelihood because them crossing there becomes very, very good, but they're still crossing. We've still got vehicles coming down here that can run off the road. So we've got still quite a bit of, we've got all these other things still within that.
Is that considered a primary treatment?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. For intersection. Yeah, but it would be a primary treatment, yes.
That's all the questions for now. Thank you, Ken.
Okay. So in a full safe system assessment, and you don't sort of stop at the matrix. You then start to ask even more questions about road user behaviour, vehicles, and post-crash care. Now, often you want to do these earlier on before you even into the matrix, because they might guide some of your scoring in the matrix. But there are these prompt questions out of the Austroads documentation, and they say, are road users likely to be alert and compliant, and are there factors that influence this? What are the expected compliance and enforcement levels? Alcohol, drugs, speed, road rules, driving hours? What's the likelihood of driver fatigue? Can enforcement be conducted safely? Are there special road users, entertainment precincts, elderly, children, on-road activities, motorcycle routes, distraction by environmental factors? So tourism, a big fish on the top of a building or something, and risk-taking behaviours. So what you're doing with these are not questions that you actually put a score to particularly, but you do some commentary around each of these. You think about that, you talk to others, you put some dot points down. And that does a few things. It, first of all, could inform your scoring if you've picked up and noticed something. It could be your likelihood score, could be the severity score, it might even be the exposure score. So you might alter your score based on some of the answers you're putting down to this. But you also might come up with ideas, recommendations, treatments that are outside of the infrastructure, that are initiatives with the pub that's on the corner, that are looking, with the enforcement and understanding how the enforcement is conducted and what tweaks could happen there. So it gives you this ability to holistically look at the safe system. The vehicles. What is the level of alignment with the ideal of safer vehicles? So that's a pretty broad brush question, which is, I suppose, more catered towards looking at a whole community or a mine site or something like that, and understanding what their fleet is and and the like, but it could, give you an indication of the severity outcomes, and you might, by looking and questioning this, say, well, this community has got quite old vehicles with very low safety features, and thus, the severity score might go up a little bit. And then you note some of this stuff in there, and it may give you some further ideas on treatments. Other factors that attract a large number of unsafe vehicles is the percentage of heavy vehicles too high for the existing design? Is it a recreational motorcycle route? Are there resources to detect non-roadworthy, overloaded, unregistered vehicles? Can enforcement be conducted safely? That's an interesting one. And has vehicle breakdown been catered for? Can enforcement activities be conducted safely? I've enjoyed safe system assessments where we've talked to the police and rolled out the plans and said, this is what we're thinking. What are your thoughts on this? And they sort of go, oh, well, we won't be able to do this and that. And okay, that's interesting. And then some of the examples that have been really wonderful have been to say, well, it would be great if we could have an area where we could put our booze bus and our number plate recognition vehicle, and then some slight alterations in those early planning phases of the project have given these wonderful facilities for enforcement to be conducted in a very safe manner. And so one that springs to mind was where an old sort of stack site was made into an area that the booze bus could go, and there was a barrier system sort of put in place and a number plate recognition vehicle area further up, purpose built basically. And then it's just a really easy, wonderful place for them to undertake their enforcement activities in a really safe manner. And to me, I mean, that project was $103 million infrastructure upgrade in an area. It would, I don't even, like, the increased cost, if any. In fact, I don't even think there would have been an increased cost in what they were doing, because it was just like tweaks on the design. But it's just a great acknowledgement that we can have this holistic interactive system where the infrastructure and the enforcement are working together, and wins all round. Post-crash care. Are there issues that might influence safe and efficient post-crash care in the event of a severe injury, congestion, access, stopping space? So that one's often most comes up in urban motorway style assessments and trying to understand and unpack how incidents are dealt with. Do emergency medical services operate as efficiently and rapidly as possible? Interestingly, in the early days of safe system assessments, I was in New Zealand with Bruce Corbin, and we were sort of doing some of the safe system assessment thinking for the Coromandel loop there, and running through these sorts of questions with the groups, and that was one where there was a lot of discussion about that ability to get injured motorcyclists from some of those areas quickly to be treated, and the semi-remoteness of it, and the time, and discussions around those sorts of helicopter landing areas, and working with emergency services if possible to do that. So that's another one where we would just want to be thinking about infrastructure only improvements, but no, we've got a whole system to work with here, and are there other things that can be done? So then, are other road users and emergency response teams protected during a crash event? Are drivers provided correct information to address travel speeds on the approach? Is there reliable information via radio VMS? Is there provision for e-safety safety systems based on modern information communication technology or cooperative ITS? That's a bit of a question again for more a community or a fleet or the like, or even a program, but it does come up in some of them. Again, some big projects thinking about the vehicles of the future and their communication needs, their ability to read roads, ability to have that connected ITS style approach. So it gets quite savvy and complicated in those. This is a qualitative question, and you don't need to get too concerned about it. But if it is sort of like a $500 million upgrade of and I don't know, $1 billion new tunnel through somewhere in Auckland or something like that, and you probably would want to engage with some of these ITS style experts to understand those sorts of features and the like. No doubt they're doing their own study and work on this, but you could have those conversations of how this fits with road safety and the like. But there's also a little bit of this new stuff called roads that cars can read, and it's early guidance, mainly out of Europe, that indicates the features of a road environment that the cars of the future are relying on. And you can start to do a bit of that thinking in a safe system assessment. It's worth a read, I mean, just for anybody in the space, because we should be more and more designing roads for the electronic eye and the vehicles of the future. We're lucky to a degree that they're making the vehicles, the electronic eyes, sort of pick up what the human eye picks up as well. So we're kind of aligned, but there are some interesting things that pop out of those sort of looks. But yeah, I mean, the meat of the assessments, that matrix, this is all providing us valuable intel to feed into the matrix to come up with new initiatives and ideas that are maybe a little bit out of the usual view of simply pour the concrete right and the like. How are we going on time here, Kathy?
Yeah, we're getting close to running out of time, Ken. 20 minutes. If you're doing an SSA for a portion of the road with several intersections, how do you manage that? Do you average them?
So there, a very good question, and we've pre-prepared you a whole fact sheet on that one, how to do a route with the multiple intersections. So there's two possible ways that you can do it. I have a preference, and then I have a colleague who has a preference on another way. But so the way we do it is to chop it up into homogeneous sections. So if you've got multiple intersections with the same general setup, you can do them together, and you may, within your arrival at that score for intersections, be dot pointing stuff at the specific intersections. I tend to do a matrix for like major intersections on their own, and then mid-block sections, as long as they're sort of the same, homogeneous. And then it gives me a number of different matrices that I can nicely put onto a map in a sense. So what I then have is sort of some, in my executive summary, got like that, crossroad, for example, and then I have sort of like a graph that comes off that. Graph that comes off that. And then I'll probably do sort of some mid-block, assuming that the mid-blocks are all the same. Now the mid-block may have a score on intersections of 0, or if it had some little minor dirt tracks coming off or something like that, there might be a different intersection score. So you're sort of almost painting this picture of where the risk lies based on the assessment protocol. Now the other option is to do a weighted average, which, as I said, my colleague does because he just loves a spreadsheet, and so has developed sort of his own methodology on a weighted average based on a whole lot of different factors, and then just has pages and pages of justification and weighted averages based on volumes and the like out of these intersections. But it's far more complicated to do that. I like the simple tool because of the broad brush nature of these assessments. So hopefully that answers that one. Other ones, Kathy?
Not at the moment.
Okay. So you've gone and done your existing conditions matrix, you've done your matrices for the any number of designs that are proposed, you've answered those qualitative questions, and you're going to report all of this. And so you identify the type of assessment you're doing. Now, I haven't even talked to you about a full or a rapid safe system assessment. Again, this is a thing that Victoria and South Australia have come up with. And the next module, I take you through the differences. But in your report, you would list that. You would say who the team members were, meetings and site inspections that were undertaken, when and who was there, description of the assessment process. And I still like to see that in safe system assessments because, you know, it's new and people are still trying to get their head around it. The background of the project and the context, which you've got from those qualitative initial scope context questions, the matrix with the scores and commentary on the factors. So no good just to put numbers in there. You need to justify and explain. And you do that for all of your design options. Commentary on other safe system components. So they're those qualitative questions and any other commentary you want to make in there about the holistic system and interaction. And suggested treatments or changes within the design which would improve alignment with safe system principles. Okay, so what we've done to try and make your life easier, we've popped an example safe system assessment into the resources so you can see one that's been completed. And for your assignment, what we've done is given you this Word document. It's in the Module 5 folder. So we're currently in Module 4. You go to the next folder, which is Module 5, and it's just doing your assessment. It's a Word document. The Victorians have produced a template that all infrastructure projects that are safe system assessed will be using this template. So a little bit like the New Zealanders you have done with road safety audit, where you've got that specific template that you like to be used. Now, the Victorian one is, they've said, you know, feel free to change the branding, put your own branding on it and colors and all of that. But here's, you know, making sure everybody's filling out the same headings and using the same matrix and the like. So what we've done is we've grabbed that. And then what I did, again, to make your life easier, is just highlighted in yellow the things that you have to do, have to change, have to write your own words in. So there's lots in there that I've just struck out and said, don't do that for the purposes of this exercise. But if you are going to do a full safe system assessment at some point, I've given you the full templates in the resource folder. For the assignment one, find there one that's got highlights. And you'll go through and you'll fill out all the bits. So delete the yellow, rewrite it. You're going to create your own graph. So this, you're going to have to, you know, open up an Excel, pop your numbers in, create the graph yourself. Okay. You're going to have to fill out the matrix. I'm going to show you that document. I'm going to jump to that actual document and just walk through it shortly. But I do want to just talk a little bit about occupational health and safety when you're out there on the site visit. The site visits, the locations have all been looked at on Street View and the like, and can be looked at very safely. The low risk if you are acting appropriately. Wear your high-vis vests, stay off the road. We don't want you out there, you know, putting your head down to look at the runoff and drainage of Canberra, the road and those sorts of things. You're just there to get a general feel for how it operates and have a look around for your existing conditions score. You don't want to, this is not that detailed. You know, just be safe out there. Don't be a hazard to other road users as well. So, you know, if you're in a group, don't stand there and make people walk out onto the road to get around you as a group. Park safely. Don't park in areas that are going to make cyclists go into traffic or block sight lines out of intersections and those sort of things. So a lot of these park down the side road and you've got, you're easy there. And what we've done is created a safe work method statement, which we require you in the little quiz in Schoology, basically to acknowledge that you've had a look at it. And it's, very logical stuff for all of you who are working in this industry, but, saying things like don't go out onto the site intoxicated and wear your high-vis vest and those sorts of things. Now, I know you have some good protocols in Wakatahi on how you go about site visits to make it safe. So please follow all those procedures as well. So that's the little safety briefing. And I'm going to jump to the Word document, but Kathy, I'll take questions as I do that. And you can add anything that I've missed in terms of the task.
I think you've covered it all very well. Thank you, Ken. There's some questions just about locations, so I'll answer those offline or on the side here whilst you bring that one up. But that's about it for questions at the moment. We've got 10 minutes to go, so if you've got any questions or you're not sure about something, now's the time to ask.
So each of you will be given one design. So not giving you multiple options, it's just the one. As we've said, safety assessments can be done on multiple options, but we've just given you one, which means you will come up with two matrices. You'll have the existing conditions and you'll have your design. So this is the document you're getting. So you can see lots of things there. Only the highlighted sections, lots of stuff crossed out. So we don't need you writing an executive summary. I don't want you to sort of have to waste time, but obviously a great important thing if you are doing one, so that the executives can just pick it up and have a glance at the exec summary, which would have that graph. So you don't need to do this sort of background stuff. We do want you to put your name in, and if you do it with multiple people, we want the names of the team. You can do it by yourself, that's not a problem, and some of you will probably have to do that for your locations, but we want to see who was in the team. We're not going to actually get you to do these background prompt questions because you don't have, and you won't be given that information, you don't have a project team to talk to, so it's just going to be, you're going to have to make some assumptions for a training exercise. Little description of the proposed works, you can keep that short, and then your sort of summary of the assessment and what the outcomes were, the overarching scores with your one option, replace this graph with your graph that you're going to create, and then we want to see the matrices. So we've got there the existing conditions. You'll fill all that out, lots and lots of dot points in there, justify that score, total it all up, copy that, paste it again for your design option, and then the treatment, which is in two categories here. Now, so for some of those people who want to use that step to words, you're going to have to create your own new box if you really want to put something in. But primary treatments, so your real big step change ones go in here, and supporting treatments, lots of other things, signs, line marking, all of that go in here. You leave this project response column blank. But this is because when you hand it to a project manager and designer alike, that's where they're meant to fill out some answers. Make sure they do something with this report. Change things accordingly. But for our purposes of doing an assessment, leave it blank. Don't worry about a conclusion. What we do want to see, though, is a photo of you at the site to give us assurance that you went to the site. We still think it's a very important part of the safe system assessments to get to the site. For certainly most of them, there is, I'll talk to you next week about a rapid assessment that may not have a site visit, but you do gain a wonderfully rich understanding of the way the area functions and operates and the like when you're on site. So at least for this training exercise, we really want you to go there, take a selfie or take a group photo or whatever it is, show us that you were there. You could put some other site photos if you want, but we're not really requiring those for the purposes of this exercise. Now, when you're out on site, if somebody comes up to you because you're out there in a high-vis vest and maybe with a clipboard or something like that, no doubt the public want to know what you're doing and what's being planned and all these sorts of things. Just any exercise, and please don't show them the plans because some of them have been created for this purpose and some of them are existing for one reason or other, and it's not our job to be running the community consultation. So just, yeah, be sensible around that. Training exercise is your answer. So that's what you'll be completing, and you'll finish that off and upload it to Schoology. We'd like it if it's PDF'd and uploaded, but you can upload it any other way. Of course, if you have any trouble with this, in terms of you go, oh my God, I really have no idea what I'm doing here or the like, don't stress out too much. Get in contact with Kathy and myself, and we'll organise some one-on-one coaching. Happy for you to, find a very nice, safe location near the site, and we can FaceTime in and we can look at parts of it. We've looked at them on Street View anyway, and the designs and everything, so we're quite familiar with what you'll be having a look at. But we're happy to do that, and I really do think you'll find it quite a good process in terms of unpacking where the risk is coming from in these areas. Think broadly, think beyond just the infrastructure, think about the users of the area, the land use, the different vehicles that are out there, whether enforcement and things are happening. So think quite broadly, and I think you'll come up with a good assignment. Look at that Austroad Safe System Assessment Framework for the categorization of treatments into primary supporting treatments. It helps you. It's from about page 27, 21 or 27 on, and it just got every crash type, and it's got possible treatments, and it says this is a supporting or a primary treatment. So that'll help you, because that's the one thing I'm finding a lot of new safe system assessors are getting a bit wrong. Any questions I need to deal with, Kathy, or are you answering everything behind the scenes?
I'm doing my best here. So we have got some questions now. I probably want to let everyone know that there's basically one site per city or town, depending on where you're from. So we do have just the one site in Auckland. I'm going to see if I can rustle up another one for Auckland. So if anyone in Auckland does want a different site option, if I can rustle one up today, then just send me through an email and I'll see what I can do there. Due date, we have made it due next the 16th, whatever day that is. So that is only 6 days away, and we appreciate that it's quite a busy time of year. So if you can't get it in by then, that's all good. It just means that we won't probably get to marking them until Christmas Eve. Ken, are you busy?
Christmas Day, Kathy. That's the big beer family marking of safe system assessments. That's what we do.
Okay, get them in whenever you like then. If it's not possible to go outside, can you use Street View? Now, Ken's pretty against this one, aren't you, Ken? Yeah.
Sorry, I just feel that we start to, well, there's an assurance from our perspective that you're getting an understanding of this whole process. There's also I'm very conscious that this can slip into a practice of doing these all from Street View, and so people will just we'll just see these sort of token, say, system assessments being done. The if you're in that situation and you go, well, I can't get there and it's really hard, get in contact with us and we'll just create you another site that is closer and much easier for you. I would prefer to do that than say, I just do it from Street View, because I think it just waters down the process.
Yeah, so I've already got some comments from some different locations, so I'll follow those up today and try and get you one before the end of today, if not Friday. Okay.
So on that, if you had, if you're looking at a different location and you had a design, in the office, or you knew of one that local council had or something like that, flick that over to us and you can do that. That would be helpful. Otherwise, we will make it happen for you.
Sure. So we'll meet again in a week's time. So you've got the week off to do your assessment and your site visit. And if you can, get them in before next session. But yeah, appreciate it's that hectic time of year. Yeah.
So from our perspective, we would love them in and we'd love to sort of close things out. However, if you can't, it's okay. We just don't issue your certificate until you've successfully done it, and we don't give you any of your prizes as well. So that's what we're holding until it's done. But no, I think you'll actually enjoy it. Use it as an enjoyable exercise. It's good. Get out on a site, have a look, think about things from a new perspective, jot things down, and I'm sure you'll do a great job of it.
Excellent. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, everyone. And we'll catch you in a week's time.
And keep in contact if you need. Definitely. We're here to help.
That's right. Bye.
Bye.